Sophie Hayes stood in front of the mirror in her small Manhattan apartment, adjusting the collar of her crisp white blouse. At 26 years old, she had worked incredibly hard to land her position as executive assistant at Sterling Global Enterprises, one of the most prestigious investment firms on Wall Street. Her boss, Julian Sterling, was a 34-year-old billionaire who had built his empire from the ground up after inheriting a modest real estate business from his late grandfather. The previous weekend, Sophie had traveled to the Hamptons with her best friend Rachel Park for a much-needed break from the demanding pace of New York City life. The two women had spent Saturday lounging on the beach, soaking up the sun and laughing about everything from bad dating experiences to their dreams for the future. Sophie had gotten the most perfect tan, and the bikini lines were crisp and defined. That Monday morning, as Sophie prepared for another busy week at the office, she decided to text Rachel a photo showing off her tan lines. She snapped a quick picture in the bathroom mirror, showing just enough of her shoulder and collarbone to display the sun-kissed results of their beach day. Nothing too revealing, just a fun snapshot between friends. Sitting at her kitchen table with her coffee, Sophie opened her messaging app and typed Rachel's name. Or so she thought. In her morning haze, her finger slipped and she selected Julian Sterling instead. She attached the photo, added a quick message saying, "Look at these perfect tan lines from our beach day," and hit send. The moment of horror. Sophie took a sip of her coffee and set down her phone, feeling satisfied with her weekend accomplishment. It was only when she glanced back at her screen 30 seconds later that her entire world stopped. The name at the top of the conversation thread read Julian Sterling. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably as she stared at the screen in disbelief. No, this cannot be happening," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She frantically searched for a way to unsend the message, but the small check marks next to it had already turned blue. He had seen it. Her billionaire boss had just received a photo of her tan lines. Sophie felt the room spinning around her. Her carefully built professional reputation was crumbling in an instant. She imagined Julian showing the photo to other executives, laughing at her stupidity, or worse, thinking she had sent it intentionally to seduce him. The thought made her stomach turn. She had always been so careful to maintain absolute professionalism at work, never crossing any boundaries, never giving anyone a reason to question her integrity. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. It was Rachel calling, probably wondering why Sophie had not responded to her earlier message. She could not bring herself to answer. How could she explain this disaster? She spent the next 20 minutes pacing her apartment, rehearsing apologies in her mind, considering whether she should call in sick or maybe just quit her job altogether and move to another city. But Sophie Hayes was not a coward. She had worked too hard to let one mistake destroy everything. She took a deep breath, finished getting ready, and headed to the office, determined to apologize immediately and accept whatever consequences awaited her. Sterling Global Enterprises occupied the top 15 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. As Sophie rode the elevator to the executive floor, her heart pounded so loudly she was certain other passengers could hear it. When the doors opened, she walked through the elegant reception area with its marble floors and modern art installations, heading straight to her desk outside Julian's office. Julian Sterling was already there. Through the glass walls of his corner office, she could see him standing by the window, pressed to his ear, looking out over the city skyline. He was tall, with dark hair that was always perfectly styled, and he wore custom-tailored suits that emphasized his athletic build. Every woman in the office had noticed how handsome he was, but Sophie had always kept those thoughts strictly to herself. She sat at her desk and turned on her computer, trying to appear normal even though her hands were still shaking. An hour passed, then two. Julian had several back-to-back phone calls and did not emerge from his office. Sophie began to wonder if he was avoiding her, planning what to say, or perhaps drafting termination papers. Finally, around 11 o'clock, her desk phone rang. Julian's voice came through the speaker, calm and professional as always. "Sophie, could you come into my office, please? I need to discuss something with you."
This was it. Sophie stood up, smoothed down her skirt, and walked into his office on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. The unexpected response. Julian was sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. He gestured to the chair across from him. Please, sit down." Sophie sat, her posture rigid, hands folded tightly in her lap. "Mr. Sterling, I need to apologize. The photo I sent you this morning was a terrible mistake. I was trying to send it to my friend Rachel, and I accidentally selected your name instead. I would never intentionally send you something inappropriate. I completely understand if you want to terminate my employment, but please know it was purely accidental." The words tumbled out in a rush, and when she finished, Sophie held her breath, waiting for his response. Julian leaned back in his chair, studying her face for a long moment. Then, to her complete surprise, a small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Sophie, take a breath. I know it was an accident. The message made that pretty clear." Sophie blinked in confusion. "You are not angry?" "Why would I be angry about an honest mistake?" Julian asked, his tone gentle. "You are one of the most professional, dedicated employees I have ever had. One accidental text does not change that." Relief washed over Sophie so intensely that she felt tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I promise it will never happen again." "I am sure it will not," he said, his smile widening slightly. "And Sophie, you can call me Julian when we are alone. We have been working together for 2 years now. I think we can drop some of the formality." As Sophie left his office, she felt like she had just survived a near-death experience. But she also noticed something she had never seen before in Julian's eyes. It was not anger or amusement. It was something else entirely. Something that made her heartbeat quicken in a completely different way. What Sophie did not know was that Julian Sterling had stared at that photo for far longer than he should have. And for the first time since she had started working for him, he had allowed himself to see her as more than just his assistant. Everything was about to change. 3 weeks had passed since the photo incident, and Sophie had almost convinced herself that life had returned to normal. Julian treated her with the same professional courtesy as always, and she had managed to stop blushing every time she entered his office. Almost. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Julian called Sophie into his office for what she assumed would be a routine briefing. Instead, he gestured to the chair across from his desk with an unusually serious expression on his face. "Sophie, I have something important to discuss with you," Julian began, sliding a thick folder across the desk toward her. "Sterling Global has just acquired a boutique investment firm in Boston. It's a complicated merger that requires meticulous documentation, financial reorganization, and coordination between multiple departments. I need someone I can trust completely to manage the administrative side of this project." Sophie opened the folder, scanning through pages of contracts, financial statements, and merger agreements. Her eyes widened at the scope of the project. "This is massive, Mr. Sterling. Julian."
"It is," he agreed, watching her reaction carefully. "It will require long hours, including evenings, and possibly some weekends. The timeline is aggressive because we need to finalize everything before the end of the quarter. I will be honest with you, Sophie. I am asking you because you are the best person for this job, but I will understand if you prefer not to work so closely with me given what happened." Sophie looked up from the folder, meeting his eyes directly. "I want to do it. This is exactly the kind of experience I need to advance my career. I will not let personal embarrassment get in the way of professional opportunity." Julian's expression softened with something that looked like admiration. "I was hoping you would say that. We start tomorrow evening. Plan to stay late." Late nights and growing tension. The first week of the project was intense. Sophie and Julian worked side by side until 9 or 10 o'clock each night, reviewing documents, making calls to lawyers and accountants, and organizing the mountain of paperwork required for the merger. The office would empty out around 6, leaving them alone on the executive floor, with only the glow of desk lamps and the twinkling lights of the city spread out below them. During these late sessions, Sophie began to see a different side of Julian Sterling. Without the constant interruptions of the business day, he relaxed. He made jokes, asked about her life outside of work, and shared stories about his own journey from a struggling entrepreneur to a billionaire businessman. People think money solves all problems, Julian said one evening, loosening his tie and rolling up his shirt sleeves. They had just finished a particularly grueling conference call with attorneys. But it just creates different ones. Everyone wants something from you. You never know if people like you for yourself or for what you can give them. Sophie looked at him thoughtfully as she organized a stack of contracts. That sounds incredibly lonely. It is, Julian admitted, his voice quiet. I have not had a genuine conversation with someone outside of my family in years. Until recently. Their eyes met across the desk, and Sophie felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with work stress. She quickly looked back down at her papers, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her body.
Vanessa Clark had worked at Sterling Global for 5 years and had always harbored ambitions that went beyond her position as a senior account manager. Tall, blonde, and confident, Vanessa had made no secret of her attraction to Julian, though he had never responded to her obvious advances. When Vanessa noticed that Sophie was staying late every evening, leaving the office at the same time as Julian, her jealousy ignited like gasoline meeting a match. She began spreading subtle rumors around the office, suggesting that Sophie was receiving special treatment, that perhaps her closeness to the boss was not entirely professional. I am just saying it is convenient that she gets assigned to the biggest project of the year right after sending him that photo, Vanessa whispered to a group of colleagues in the break room. Maybe it was not such an accident after all. The gossip spread quickly through the office grapevine. Sophie began noticing the sideways glances, the conversations that stopped when she walked into a room, the cold shoulders from colleagues who had previously been friendly. It hurt more than she wanted to admit. One evening, as she was gathering her things to leave, her friend from accounting, Monica Reyes, pulled her aside. Sophie, I need to tell you something. Vanessa has been saying things about you and Julian, nasty things. I just thought you should know. Sophie felt her stomach drop. What kind of things? Monica hesitated, then sighed. That you are sleeping with him to get ahead, that the photo was intentional. I do not believe any of it, but other people are talking. That night, Sophie went home and cried for the first time since the photo incident. She had worked so hard to build her reputation, and now it was being destroyed by lies and jealousy. She considered confronting Vanessa, or perhaps asking to be removed from the project, but both options felt like admitting defeat. The moment everything changed. It was a Friday night, nearly 3 weeks into the project, when everything between Sophie and Julian shifted irrevocably. They had been working for hours, and exhaustion was setting in. Julian had ordered dinner from a nearby Italian restaurant, and they ate at the small conference table in his office, surrounded by papers and files. Sophie, can I ask you something personal? Julian said suddenly, setting down his fork. She looked up, surprised by the serious tone in his voice. Of course. Are people talking about us, about you staying late with me? Sophie felt her cheeks flush. She should have known he would notice the change in office dynamics. There has been some gossip, she admitted carefully. Nothing I cannot handle. Julian's jaw tightened with anger. Who? Tell me who is spreading rumors and I will put a stop to it immediately. No, please do not. That will only make it worse. People will think you're protecting me because there's something between us, which will just confirm their suspicions. But there is nothing between us, Julian said, though his voice lacked conviction. Is there? The question hung in the air between them. Sophie knew she should say no, should laugh it off, should maintain the professional distance that had kept her safe all these years. But she was tired of pretending, tired of ignoring the electricity that sparked every time their hands accidentally brushed over a document, tired of denying the way her heart raced when he smiled at her. I do not know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Is there? Julian stood up from his chair and walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her. Sophie's breath caught in her throat as he looked down at her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Sophie, I've been trying to fight this for weeks. Ever since that photo, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Not just about the picture, but about you. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, the way you care so deeply about doing everything perfectly. I am falling in love with you, Sophie Hayes, and I can't pretend otherwise anymore. Sophie stood up, her legs trembling. She knew she should walk away, should protect herself and her career, should do the sensible thing. But when Julian reached out and gently cupped her face in his hands, all of her resolve crumbled. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. And it terrifies me. Then let us be terrified together, Julian murmured before lowering his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative and questioning, but it quickly deepened into something more passionate. Sophie's arms wrapped around Julian's neck as his hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer. Years of loneliness and weeks of suppressed desire poured into that kiss, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. What do we do now? Sophie asked, her forehead resting against his. I don't know, Julian admitted with a soft laugh, but we'll figure it out together. As they stood there in the empty office, wrapped in each other's arms with the city lights twinkling below them, both Sophie and Julian knew that they had just crossed a line that would change everything. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. I feel like we are living two separate lives, Sophie confessed one Saturday morning as they lay tangled in Julian's silk sheets. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting golden patterns across their skin. At work, you are Mr. Sterling, my boss, and I am just your assistant. Here, we are Julian and Sophie, two people falling deeper in love every day. I do not know how much longer I can keep these two worlds separate. Julian pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I know, darling. I hate it too. But I do not want you to face the judgment and gossip that would come if we went public. People can be cruel, especially to women they think are using relationships to advance their careers. But I'm not using you, Sophie protested, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him. I love you for who you are, not what you have. I know that, Julian said softly, tracing his fingers along her arm. And that is precisely why I love you. But not everyone will believe it, Sophie. They will say terrible things about you, question your integrity, diminish everything you have accomplished. I cannot bear the thought of my feelings for you damaging your reputation. Making a difficult decision. The merger project was nearing completion, and Sophie found herself at a crossroads. She had proven herself capable of handling complex, high-level work, and her resume now included experience that many assistants never got the opportunity to gain. But she also knew that as long as she worked for Julian, their relationship would remain in the shadows, and her professional accomplishments would always be questioned. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at the office, where Vanessa had made snide comments within earshot about women who knew how to get ahead, Sophie made a decision. She sat across from Julian in his apartment, her hands folded nervously in her lap. Julian, I have been thinking about my career, about our situation, and how we can move forward without either of us compromising who we are. I'm listening. I want to look for a position at another company, not because I want to leave you, but because I need to build my career on my own merit. As long as I work for you, people will always question whether I earned my success or whether I received it because of our relationship. And honestly, I will question it too. Julian was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. You are one of the bravest, most principled people I have ever met. Most people would be content to stay where they are, enjoying the benefits of being close to the boss. But not you. You want to earn everything yourself. Does that upset you? Asked Sophie nervously. Upset me? Sophie, it makes me love you even more, Julian said with a smile. You are absolutely right. You deserve to shine on your own, to have a career that no one can question or diminish. I will support you completely, even though it means I will lose the best assistant I ever had. Tears welled in Sophie's eyes. You are not losing me. You are gaining a girlfriend who can actually be your girlfriend without hiding. When you put it that way, I think I'm getting the better end of this deal, Julian said with a smile, standing up and pulling her into his arms. A new beginning. Within 2 weeks, Sophie had interviewed with 3 prestigious companies and received 2 job offers. She accepted a position as operations coordinator at Bennett Financial Group, a respected firm in downtown Manhattan. The salary was significantly higher than what she had been making, and the role offered real opportunities for advancement. Her last day at Sterling Global was bittersweet. Several colleagues who had been genuinely kind to her over the years threw a small goodbye party in the conference room. Monica gave her a heartfelt hug and whispered, "Go be amazing, and do not let anyone make you feel like you don't deserve everything good that comes to you." Even Vanessa made an appearance, though her smile was tight and insincere. "Good luck with your new position, Sophie. I hope it works out for you." Sophie smiled graciously. "Thank you, Vanessa. I hope you find what you're looking for, too." Julian maintained perfect professionalism during her goodbye, shaking her hand and thanking her for her years of dedicated service. But his eyes told a different story, full of pride and love and the promise of what was to come. That evening, they celebrated her new beginning at an elegant French restaurant in Tribeca. No more hiding in Julian's apartment or meeting in secret. They sat at a table by the window, holding hands across the white tablecloth, laughing and talking without fear of who might see them. "How does it feel?" Julian asked, raising his wineglass in a toast. "To be free? It feels incredible," Sophie admitted, clinking her glass against his. "Scary, but incredible. For the first time, I feel like I can be both your partner and my own person." "You have always been your own person, Sophie. That's one of the things I admire most about you. You never lost yourself, even when it would have been easier to do so." Thriving independently. Sophie's new position at Bennett Financial Group exceeded all her expectations. Her supervisor, Thomas Crawford, was impressed by her organizational skills, attention to detail, and ability to manage complex projects. Within 3 months, she was leading a team of junior coordinators and being included in high-level strategic meetings. The experience validated everything Sophie had hoped for. Her colleagues respected her for her competence and work ethic, not because of who she was dating. When she received praise for a successful project launch, she knew she had earned it herself. The confidence that came with this independence transformed her, making her stand taller, speak with more authority, and pursue opportunities she might have previously thought were beyond her reach. Julian watched her flourish with undisguised pride. They had dinner together several times a week, spent weekends exploring the city or relaxing at his apartment, and talked on the phone every night before bed. Their relationship deepened now that it was not overshadowed by the complications of working together.
6 months after Sophie left Sterling Global, Julian began planning something special. He had known for months that he wanted to marry her, but he wanted the proposal to be perfect, something that honored both their journey together and Sophie's independence. He enlisted the help of Rachel, Sophie's best friend, who was thrilled to be part of the plan. Together, they orchestrated an elaborate surprise that would take place at the Museum of Modern Art, one of Sophie's favorite places in the city. On a crisp autumn Saturday, Rachel convinced Sophie to meet her at the museum for an afternoon of art and catching up. Sophie arrived wearing a burgundy dress and her favorite boots, excited for some quality time with her best friend. As they wandered through the galleries, Rachel kept glancing at her watch, steering Sophie toward the sculpture garden with increasing urgency. "There's a new installation I heard about," Rachel said mysteriously. "It is supposed to be incredible. Come on." When they stepped into the sculpture garden, Sophie gasped. The entire space had been transformed with thousands of white roses and twinkling lights strung between the trees. In the center of the garden stood Julian, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit, holding a single red rose. "Rachel, what is happening?" Sophie whispered, her heart beginning to race. "Go find out," Rachel said with a knowing smile, gently pushing her forward. Sophie walked toward Julian on trembling legs, aware that several museum visitors had stopped to watch the scene unfold. When she reached him, he took her hands in his eyes shining with emotion. Sophie Hayes, 11 months ago, you accidentally sent me a photo that changed my life. Julian began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. In that moment, I saw you not just as my incredibly capable assistant, but as a beautiful, fascinating woman who had been right in front of me all along. Since then, you have challenged me, inspired me, and loved me in ways I never thought possible. Tears were already streaming down Sophie's face as Julian continued. You could have taken the easy path. You could have stayed at Sterling Global, accepted whatever advantages our relationship might have given you, and no one would have blamed you. But that is not who you are. You chose the harder road because you needed to prove to yourself and to the world that you could succeed on your own merit. And succeed you have, spectacularly. He released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. The crowd that had gathered around them let out a collective gasp as he lowered himself to one knee. Sophie, you have made me a better man. You have taught me what it means to love someone for who they truly are, not for what they can do for you. You have shown me that real partnership means supporting each other's dreams, even when it is difficult or inconvenient. I cannot imagine spending my life with anyone else. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring that caught the afternoon light and threw rainbows across the garden. Will you marry me? Sophie could barely see through her tears, but she did not need to see clearly to know her answer. Yes, she said, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Julian stood and slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a kiss that drew applause from the crowd around them. Sophie laughed through her tears, wrapping her arms around his neck and holding him tight. I love you so much, Sophie whispered against his lips. I love you too, Julian murmured back. My brilliant, independent, beautiful Sophie.
The perfect ending. 6 months later, Sophie and Julian were married in an intimate ceremony at a historic estate in the Hudson Valley. The guest list was small, only their closest friends and family, exactly the way they both wanted it. Sophie wore a simple but elegant lace gown, and Julian could not stop staring at her as she walked down the aisle toward him. When they exchanged vows, they promised to support each other's dreams, to trust each other completely, and to choose love every single day. At the reception, Rachel gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. I will never forget the day Sophie called me in a panic because she had accidentally sent a beach photo to her boss. She was convinced her life was over. Little did she know, her life was actually just beginning. Sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the greatest blessings. Sophie looked at Julian across the table and he reached over to squeeze her hand. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that mortifying morning when she sent the wrong photo, through the secret meetings and difficult decisions, to this perfect moment surrounded by people who loved him. She had learned so much along the way. She had learned that love was worth fighting for, but not at the expense of losing yourself. She had learned that real partnership meant supporting each other's independence, not trying to control or possess each other. She had learned that the opinions of strangers mattered far less than staying true to your own values. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes the most embarrassing moments of our lives are actually the universe's way of pushing us toward our destiny. As Sophie and Julian swayed together on the dance floor under strings of lights with their friends and family celebrating around them, Sophie whispered in her husband's ear, "Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me that day." "Thank you for being brave enough to be seen," Julian whispered back, "and for being even braver when you chose to build your own path. I have never been more proud to stand beside someone." They danced until the stars came out. Two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way and had built something beautiful through honesty, respect, and unwavering love. And whenever anyone asked them how they met, Sophie would smile mischievously and say, "Let us just say it involved a photo, a mistaken text, and the luckiest accident of my life." The end. Their story proved that true love does not ask you to make yourself smaller or to sacrifice your dreams. True love celebrates your independence, supports your growth,
and stands beside you as an equal partner. Sophie and Julian built a life together based on mutual respect, trust, and the kind of deep connection that comes from truly seeing and being seen by another person. And it all started with one accidental photo on an ordinary Monday morning.